mean, there's always parts of yourself that you can overcome. And so that's William James' moral equivalent to war, essentially. You know, if you need something to grapple with, and you probably do, you can find that. You just look inside, you'll find something to grapple with. You know, inadequacy, weakness, susceptibility to temptation, narcissism, pride, envy, revenge, resentment, frustration, lack of faith, all of that. That'll keep you occupied if you really grapple with it. And yeah, I mean, that's an ancient theological question. You know, what's up with the devil? Why does the possibility of evil exist? Why is there an eternal adversary? You see that reflected in Cain and Abel, right? At the beginning of the Genesis stories, essentially. The first two human beings are good set against an adversary. And that's what opens history, that story. You think, well, why would God construct a reality where an adversary exists? And maybe it's because all things considered, a world with an adversary is a better world, just like a garden with a snake in it is a better garden. These things aren't easy to understand. No snake, no necessity to contend with snakes. So why be awake at all? No adversary, no challenge. Why be challenged? Because maybe you're better for the challenge. And maybe that's the challenge, to see if you can be better for the challenge.
But that should be internal.
Well, fundamentally, if it isn't, you'll find it externally, because you'll demonize someone to turn them into Satan so that you can find an adversary. And then that's very unfortunate for you and for them.
That's the problem.
It's just not as big a battle. It's like you battle with someone external who's malevolent, let's say, or you think they are, and usually you've got that mostly wrong, but not always. But if the battle is inside, which is where it's supposed to be, most fundamentally, then it's the ultimate. It is the ultimate challenge,
and that's the infinite game. Mm-hmm. The external one
battle between good and evil on a playing field of chaos and order. It's the eternal game. And, you know, you can play that out in the external world, but part of what the religious enterprise is about, and the Christians have really contributed to this, is the notion that sacred battle is fundamentally spiritual, which is to say, in some sense, fundamentally psychological. It's to be fought on the battleground of the soul, internally. It's a subjective issue. How do you defeat evil? You defeat the evil in your own heart. That is how you do it. And so if that's all being acted out for you in the world, well, you've misplaced Satan. That's a good way of thinking about it. This is another weakness, I think, of the atheistic position, because it's pretty hard. It's easy in some sense to dispense with belief in the highest good, but it's not so easy to dispense with belief in evil. So that's a big problem. So then where do you localize it? And you can find evidence of it everywhere, certainly in institutions. I mean, that's the whole systemic racism, corrupt patriarchy narrative, is that Satan is to be found at the core of our institutions. And to some degree, that's true, because everything we do is corrupt to some degree. And so then do you fight it sociologically? You're the good person and the institution is Satan? So you're so good, are you? You're so sure of that, are you? You've got everything in order, do you? And you might say, well, do you have to have everything in order before you fight evil on the sociological front? And the answer is, well, no, because you're never going to have everything in order, but you still shouldn't put the cart before the horse. It's a spiritual battle. And it's taken people thousands and thousands of years to figure this out. Now, first of all, it was the snake. What's evil? What's malevolent? The predatory reptile. Fair enough, man. I mean, we've been fighting with predatory reptiles for 60 million years as mammals. 60 million years. So it's a good first pass approximation. It's the snake, the poisonous snake, the external enemy, the predator. Well, what about the predator and other people? Oh yeah, that's even worse, man. It's like how predators are one thing, but predatory people, other tribes, man, they're brutal. Oh. Well, what about your predatory friend? Oh, that's pretty bad too. The friend who stabs you in the back, the person who betrays you, Judas. God, maybe that's the ultimate snake. It's like, well, how about when you betray yourself? Oh yeah. So you want to See, there's this association that's very strange that occurred in the development of Christian thought between the snake in the Garden of Eden and Satan. There's no indication in the original story that the snake has anything to do with the Lord of all evil. It's a very weird conclusion that's been drawn. It's almost extra biblical because there's almost no mention of Satan in the Bible at all, much less any direct connection between the serpent and Satan. It's a very, very strange idea, but it's part of this psychologization of evil. Like, well, what's the ultimate predator? What's the ultimate predator? What's the enemy you harbor in your own heart who hates you? That's the ultimate predator. There's these images of Mary with her head in the stars and baby in her arms and her foot on a snake. It's like, well, that's the eternal feminine. Her head's in the stars because she's oriented towards the highest good and she's protecting her infant from predators. That could be an actual predator. That's been the case throughout not just human history, but mammalian history. Could be other people who are predators. Could be men who are predators. Could be her, who's a predator. The devouring mother. It's like, well, what's the ultimate locale of genuine evil? Well, the highest religious answer is, that's in you. That's the proper place to battle it out. And I think that's true. I think it's literally and metaphorically true. And I was convinced of that in part because of Solzhenitsyn's writings, because Solzhenitsyn identified the totalitarian state with the willingness of the subjects of that state, the subjects and the perpetrators at the same time, to live by lies. No totalitarian state if people don't lie. And every time you lie in support of the totalitarian state, then you're the perpetrator. And that's a psychological issue. It's like, you're going to lie to get along or not? Say, well, what does it matter? I'll go along with it. It's okay. We'll see how it matters, because it matters. And that's all a psychodrama as far as I'm concerned. Fundamentally, when it's properly placed. You've got plenty of problems to take care of on your own front. And that's where you should concentrate your efforts.
If you were 100% certain that there was no afterlife, would you still be able to preach that there's a positive meaning in life? If you were 100% certain. Some atheists seem to be 100% certain, and yet they still preach that there's some positive meaning to life. Would you be one of those? Or would you turn into Cain, so cynical?
I think that, well, as far as I'm concerned, one of the things I learned from studying 20th century history is that, like, even if you take the most cynical of ideas, let's say that life is irredeemable suffering and perhaps isn't even justified because of that, it still seems to me that you have an ethical duty, let's say, to live in a manner that reduces that to the degree that that's possible. And I think that can be experienced as meaningful in some sense independently of the transcendent context. Now, I don't exactly know how to strip off the transcendent context, because one of the things I would say that's happened to me is, because I've spent so much time looking at the horrible things that people have done, is that it's like Jung said that this is one of his famous quotes. He said, "No tree can reach up to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." And so as I've dug deeper into the depravity of human beings, my sense of the possibility of human beings has also grown, what would you say, in proportion. And until I've become convinced, actually, that good is a more powerful force than evil, even though evil is an unbelievably powerful force. And so I can't really strip the transcendent away. Now, what bearing that has on eternity, say on an afterlife, I mean, I can't say anything about that. The only thing I guess I can say is that there are many things about being that we don't understand in the least. And we don't understand the nature of consciousness or the nature of time. So I wouldn't despair about that. But yes, I think that life can still be meaningful without there being a necessity of an afterlife.